everyone. I am so delighted to be able to kick us off in a wonderful new episode of Links and Leader. And here tonight to be able to join us as our host is our favorite superstar in supply chain, the amazing Jen Schauble. So, Jen, I'm kicking it over to you.
Thanks so much, Elisa. So, Keith, on behalf of WIN-NextGen, welcome to our second episode of Links and Leaders Inside Supply Chain Careers. I'm so excited to get to share this time with you, and I'm so grateful that you agreed to do this with me. It's
Yeah,
like getting to work together all over again.
yeah,
To start us off, could you share a little bit about your career journey, including how you picked majoring in supply chain and information systems for college?
sure. Yeah, of course. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, so my background is supply chain, my education and experience, as you mentioned. After college, I spent various supply chain roles, mainly in energy, chemicals, industrial materials, as well as pharmaceuticals. So supply chain is one of those disciplines where you can work on a bunch of different disciplines, different industries, things like that. Um, it's funny, sometimes you just need to kind of follow what the world gives you. When I was 19 as a teenager, I had a family friend that said, "Hey, would Keith be willing to work for my transportation company?" Fast forward 2 summers, I got some experience there. That was kind of the foundation, the springboard around my formal years while I was in college, selecting maybe what I want to do. Like a lot of males my age, born in the 80s, finance was a hot track. But I think my experience there kind of made me look at things a little bit differently. So that kind of propelled me, and then spent 4 exciting years at Penn State, and the rest is history, as they say.
That's awesome. So, what would you say? When you started in transportation, but then you had the finance background, what really piqued your interest to go deeper into supply chain?
Yeah, I think the one thing, that not a lot of people know, it's a really broad discipline, right? You can do a lot of different things. I always used to say it felt like kind of a cross reference between engineering and finance. So if
Mhm.
you find yourself in between the two or in some adjacent vicinity, it could be a really nice outlet for you. But just the idea of, not you work under ambiguity a lot. Things are complex. You need to work in teams to solve things. It's pretty rewarding when you work through a couple different cross dependencies with different organizations and different team members to come to a solution. I think that team effort and that collaboration that supply chain has to have was something that drew me to it early on for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, collaboration is key, right? And
Yeah.
relationships too. If you don't have the relationship and the ability to collaborate with somebody, it really makes life in supply chain a lot more difficult than it needs to be.
Yeah.
So, speaking of your experience, you have some really awesome experience across logistics, supply planning, import, export, which still, makes me shudder. Because why I always email you with questions, and procurement, to name a few. Could you share with our listeners kind of a little bit, just broad strokes about, kind of your favorite parts of your career and where you really found your groove, like where you really feel like you excel and where it makes you happy?
Yeah, good question. So it's fun. I always like to tell people when they ask about my background that I kind of grew up in logistics, right? And part of what you learn when you're young and you're in logistics is that things move quickly. And if you don't keep up and you don't have your ducks in a row, you can get left behind. So I always like to think of that as being a really good place to kind of, spread my wings, if you will. It taught me a lot of things outside of technical skills, right? It taught me how to manage my time, be communicate well. You always had to check in with things, set deadlines for yourself. And I think the foundation that I created there early in my career really set the stage for success moving on. Um, and as you kind of move through things and you show some excitement in certain areas, you tend to get more opportunities when you are someone that's willing to learn, bring a positive attitude. Those are the kind of things that people are going to be gravitate towards. So I did have an opportunity to do a couple different things, but planning is definitely something that I do enjoy doing. As you know, we work
Yeah.
together, and I think that's my primary responsibility with you. There's something about setting the tone for the organization. There's something about, taking in a bunch of different data points each month and tweaking it here, tweaking it there. I just really enjoy the strategy part of it, and then obviously the results that come with it as well. So yep, it's a little bit about, some of the areas that I enjoyed working in.
That's awesome. So, speaking of, kind of a diverse background and some stressful situations, you and I both ran supply chains during COVID, and actually you came to us at Paratek in July of 21, so shortly after COVID. So they were challenging times for sure. Can you give us a quick summary about, in addition to the time management and, liking to solve puzzles that you mentioned, how you worked through some of the more complicated parts of COVID, and why, how you kept your calm demeanor. You're always so calm, which is so important in supply chain. And that's something that, I think part of it comes with age and experience, but for some of our younger viewers, just kind of having that temperament of, yep, the world's pretty much falling apart as it shuts down. Let's figure out how to move things together. Let's get the supply chain going. Tell us a little bit about how you worked through that.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it already, but I'm a really big proponent of clear communication. And sometimes I call it over communicating, and I think it's very hard to do that too much, but it's one of those things where, we all were kind of segregated, right? People were still getting, if you recall, people were still getting accustomed to using video calls, right? Like
That is
Zoom
true.
still somewhat new. Like that was used to like call friends like overseas or things like that. So just kind of this confluence of technology and people getting accustomed to talking differently or only talking about work or discussing work, where it used to be able to have social interactions. And I just remember one big thing that helped was just acknowledging it, right? Just saying, hey, this is not ideal. This is where I think we need to discuss and kind of just work through things logically. But I think communication was the big one. And then just setting clear guidelines. I think, supply chain people in general are really good about, we talk about this a lot, and you're great at it, is going through a logical sequence. What has to happen first? And just setting people, sometimes it can be so overwhelming that people don't even know where to start. So I would say the communication aspect and then just setting clear guidelines for the team really help kind of get through a really challenging time.
Yeah, I think that's really important to note, the key, I think, working through COVID, and I know Elisa did it as well, working through a very complicated supply chain, begin with the end in mind and talk. And, I
Yeah.
mean, we talked ad nauseum. How many calls did you and I sit on when you first joined? I mean, that's all we did was talk all day long on Zoom or Teams. And again, that was new for us, but we talked it through with every country that you and I worked with,
Yeah.
every partner that you and I worked with, and we got it done because we knew what the end goal was. The end goal was to get product to patients and never let there be a gap. And so I think emphasizing to our young viewers the importance of knowing what the goal is. And I think sometimes, especially because you and I work for smaller companies, it is more ambiguous sometimes what the goal is, but you know what your company's overarching goal is, yours and mine both, get product to patients. And so I think emphasizing that and then figuring out how to walk that back and make all the pieces fit together
Yep.
so that everything flows and continuing to talk. I think we all kind of developed our more enhanced communication skills, if you will, during COVID because we wanted to make super sure that things weren't slipping through the cracks because we didn't have the benefit of sitting together.
Yep. Well said.
So, one of the items that Elisa and I discussed on my podcast, and one of our goals for WIN-NextGen, is to expose young people to careers that they may not even know exist. So, since you and I do have slightly different backgrounds educationally and work-wise, what are some career paths that students might find surprising or exciting, especially as they look for entry-level employment or maybe not
Yeah.
even getting a college degree? What are some things that you think they could look for in supply chain that might not be so obvious?
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and I actually do have a story very close to me that I think is relevant here. So I guess to start, I mean, it's not always about obviously, we see successful people typically, but and success looks like a lot of different things. And each cog of that wheel or each component of that is what drives to that end goal, as we talked about earlier. But it could be anything in a warehouse, forklift driver, customer service, working with all the carriers and the steamship lines and the trucking companies to coordinate freight. It just can do a lot of different things. It's not only office-based tasks. Now, if you're analytical, that could be an option for you, but it's really a lot of all that in between. My brother actually was not a school person. He turned 18 and said, that's enough of school for me. Went and started working his butt off in a warehouse. And to this day, he's a vice president of operations for a large global logistics company. It can happen. And I always like to tie it back to it actually is more about, I think, less about the technical skills and just, again, being organized, having a positive attitude, asking the right questions, and being coachable. You'll find that your career will accelerate. Your opportunities will come to you. And I just really want to harp on that as a young person, focus on the things that you can control, and the rest will honestly take care of itself, in my opinion.
No, I think that is a great point, and what a great
Yeah.
story about your brother. And I think it just goes to show that college is not for everyone, and it's not in everybody's future, and that's okay. There are so many things that you can do without a college degree, especially in the supply chain world. But showing up on time,
Yeah.
being curious, asking questions, asking to do more, driving to succeed, having that drive, I think, is what really, I know, something that I look for as a boss. I'm like, I want somebody who's going to, frankly, make my life easier. So is it going to be somebody that you are calling at 10 a.m.? Like, why aren't you here yet? Or is it somebody who shows up bright and early online or in the office, whatever the case may be, saying, okay, what do we need to do today? What can I learn? What can I do? So I think that's a great point you make.
Good.
All right, so let's talk about kind of technical skills. So you and I both know that your Microsoft Excel skills far exceed mine. So for young people considering the field, what skills do you think they need to take with them? Or more frankly, what did you learn in school versus on the job? I think that's something that maybe you can address more than I can because I had a slightly different educational path.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, we live in quite a fascinating time. 20 years ago when I was in school, it was, about reading case studies and getting experience on different, business cases and how things worked for them or what didn't work and learnings like that, which is still very valuable today. But it was about using Microsoft Excel and doing analysis. AI is here, folks, and it's taken this by storm. And, I think getting comfortable with that and learning how to, use it to the best of your ability. I mean, it can be used between analysis in supply chain. I think we feel right now that it's a tailwind for supply chain, which is a great thing. But just getting comfortable with that. But obviously being able to do the analysis behind it, I think is what makes using those tools so helpful. So if you don't know what to ask it, it's useless, right? You could give AI to
True.
someone that, lived 5,000 years ago and they would have no utility with it, right? So again, it's really just kind of critical thinking. Information right now feels limitless. Start researching. If there's something that piques your interest, just read, ask people. We talk about starting our own networks on here. Reach out to people and ask for advice. Not only can I get a job, so there's
Right.
just a lot of really good areas to get skills, but the technical stuff, we still use Excel today, right? But certainly keep your eye on artificial intelligence as it evolves because it's expected to be pretty profound.
Yeah, that's a great point. Watching the technology evolve over my career, my career's been almost 35 years now, and I'm not embarrassed to say that when I graduated college, Microsoft Excel did not exist, nor did the internet. And look where things have gone now. Now I put something into AI this morning. I was working on something that I could have spent a long time researching, excuse me, or I could put it into AI and have my answer in about 32 seconds and then save myself a lot of time. So I think that's a
Yeah.
great point. So let's talk about lessons from the real world. Looking back on your own career to date, if you had to pick one lesson that helped shape you in your career, what would that be? Because we all have one.
Yeah, we do. Now, there's a lot of obvious ones that come with mistakes for everyone. It happens a lot. That's okay. You learn from them. As you used to always tell me, you can make plenty of mistakes. Just don't make the same one 12 times, which I totally understood. You have to learn from them, right? I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction. I think for young people, your natural instinct is to bring like technical
Hmm.
skills, and let people know like I know what I'm doing. I can do this. I can add value. But I asked you to maybe step back and think about, I learned more about how you work with a team. Not everyone you work with operates the same way. They don't operate the same way as you. There's different things that motivate people. And I think my career really started at, I don't know if the right word, there felt like some barriers were knocked down when I realized you can treat everyone fairly. But what makes individuals go can be very different group to group, individual to individual. So I think the big lesson was really understanding who you're working with, your audience, and just really understanding again what motivates people that you're working with.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Understanding people, right? I mean, humans are all unique and you have to work with a wide variety of them no
Oh
matter
yeah,
what you choose to do with your career. But I know I would rather hire somebody with, maybe mediocre technical skills, but
yeah,
who's a really good people person and who is
yes,
highly trainable and who
yep,
wants to learn, as opposed to, I can say this because I am one, a real nerd who is just so technically driven that they don't ever think about how to talk to all the other people out here that don't know what they know,
yeah,
and that maybe they're not as trainable or coachable and or willing to learn because they think they know a lot, and they do know a lot. I'm not dismissing that, but you know understanding that human aspect is certainly what makes people's careers excel, yours included.
yeah. Yep, I think it just again, just to harp on that point again, it just comes back to the things that we can control. Even young people can just
Yeah.
those core values, just stick to them, and opportunities will come to you.
Yep, I love that. Having
Yeah,
core values in our youth is just so hugely important. So I love that you brought that up. All right, so this podcast series, Keith, is called Links and Leaders because supply chains are built on connections, as are careers, as you and I have both seen. So tell us a little bit about how professional relationships and networks have played a role in your own career journey.
yeah. No, it's an important one, folks. And it's I think obviously people always have networks and think about employment and things like that, and how can they help you. And I challenge our listeners that it's really more than that, right? It can be an outlet for getting advice. It can be an outlet for just asking questions to bouncing ideas off of. For me, I leaned on some people that I knew even just through LinkedIn blindly. And if there's people that you've worked with in the past, people feel comfortable and want to work with people that they trust, right?
Yeah.
And it offers up opportunities, jobs, promotions, again, resources for questions. Doesn't necessarily have to be, can I get a job? Again, I want to go back to that. It's advice. What should I do next? Here's a situation I'm in. What do you think? And then the other thing too is, it's not just professionally. I think, a network can be anything in your community, teachers, friends. If you can continue to build a good rapport and be someone that, you're fun to be around and confident and helpful, again, opportunities will certainly present themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I encourage young people, I try to mentor, quite a variety of young people. I encourage them to reach out to people on LinkedIn, and they are occasionally horrified, like, I can't do that. Why can't you?
Okay. No,
Worst
yeah, you
worst
can.
thing that's going to happen is they're not going to reply to you. What I mean? So I encourage our young people to kind of put themselves out there and make that connection on LinkedIn. Talk to that teacher who may know somebody in a field that you may be interested, because we really have to start connecting all those dots if we're going to make this work.
Yeah.
So, under the premise that you can learn something from everyone, which I firmly believe is true, was there a mentor or a leader who helped you guide you earlier in your career or in college? And what did you learn from them?
Yeah, good question. So two people come to mind. I spoke a little bit about the human element.
Mhm.
Colleague of mine, Steve Cardone, he was great. We used to always go through interactions together, and maybe things didn't go the way I expected them, and we would literally sit down and debrief about it, right? And he was just really patient. He reminded me a lot like you, where I think you helped me a lot. Although I wasn't right out of school, your ability to just And if I was around, you were stopped, undivided attention, and made it seem like my question or problem was the most important thing in your day. And you could have been running around from meeting to meeting. So things like that, Jen, I try and weave that into my leadership style because I just remember it being so helpful and just really having an important impact on me. But Steve Cardone was one, and then another one that comes out is Charlie Enzinger. He gave me more the technical side.
Okay.
So we all know about having complex problems and being able to explain it simply. He was an expert in that. And I remember listening to him talk about all these things, and people go back and forth, and he'll just rip out a sentence. We'd all get it, and we move on. So I think between the three of you guys, I've had a lot of good mentors in my life.
Yeah, and I think that's really important for our young people. So, if you had to give, and thank you, by the way, working with you every day was a joy. I miss it terribly. And giving you supply planning was like giving you my child, and you did such a
That's
great job with it. You made my child better,
right.
on so many levels. So you by far the best hire of my career, and I've hired a lot of people. So this is great.
Means
And
a
I mean,
lot.
you came to us, maybe an important thing to note. For some of our young viewers or people just out of college looking for jobs, you did not have a connection to Paratek. You did not have a connection to anybody in the company.
Mhm.
You applied for the job. You beat out a lot of people. I mean, we had hundreds of people apply. Um, and it came down to, I think interviewed 7 people, some of whom did have a connection. And, clearly you won for a reason. So maybe let's encourage our people as they apply for jobs, whatever job that is. While sometimes it is helpful knowing somebody to help you get in the door, first of all, that's only the first step. Second step is you have to prove yourself to keep yourself there. But you can also get a job where you know absolutely no one and be very successful. And I know you were hesitant, you were worried because you didn't have experience in pharmaceuticals. We talked through that and you didn't miss a beat. So just encouraging people to maybe step outside of their comfort zone a little bit. And if you look at a job description for our young viewers, would they apply? If you don't quite meet the qualifications, so what? You'll get kicked out of the process if nobody wants to talk to you. Which will happen. You'll get kicked out a lot, but just keep persevering. But I think it's really important to note that you came to Paratek unsolicited, on your own and without connection, and you got the job.
Yeah. No. I remember talking to you during that and saying, I'm going to do the little things well. I'm going to communicate well. And I
Yep,
remember several months in, you were like, you were right. And, from there, you were willing to work with me on everything else. So, no,
absolutely,
great experience.
absolutely. All right. So, if a high school or college student is listening to us today, and thinking about their future career, keep in mind that we target ages 14 through 24. What would you encourage them to do right now to start exploring opportunities in supply chain? Like, what do you recommend? Do you recommend a book? Do you recommend talking to people, podcasts, webinars? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say the line that comes to mind is start networking before you need something, right? Start introducing yourself now and say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm passionate about, or I'm still learning. So that'll be the first advice. Just start something out tomorrow, tonight, whenever you consume this podcast. And the other thing I want to reiterate is ask for advice, not favors when you're interacting with people in your network, right? It's not only about what you can do for me. It's just you're at that point in your lives where you want to just gain as much information as possible. Literally, your path is limitless, right? So part of this can just be overwhelming and not knowing where to go. So I think those two pieces of just start networking before you actually need something to, get some insight, and then just really focus on asking questions and advice as opposed to, favors and things like that.
I love that advice though, and I think that's key because I think excuse me, sometimes we get so caught up in everything that we have to do. You don't think, 3 steps backwards to say, oh, I should probably really establish a relationship instead of, hey, I see that you know so and so on LinkedIn. Can you introduce us?
Yeah.
And I think asking for advice. Now, I get a lot, I'm sure you do too, get a lot of random messages on LinkedIn. I read every single one. I do not reply to every single one, but because a lot of them are, do you want to own a franchise? No, I do not. Thank you. But if I see one from a college student, a high school student wanting to understand about supply chain, I'll talk to them all day
Yeah,
long, because that's really where the rubber meets the road, and that's really what our mission is, to capture that excitement and do something with it. And then when they come back around in a couple of years, hey Jen, you and I messaged, a couple of years back, you introduced me to Keith. Do you think I can reach out to Keith, and he has a job opening? What do you think? I would say absolutely. I'll
yeah.
text him myself, that sort of thing. So I think that's really great advice, Keith.
Yeah, yeah, maybe just a quick bow on that one. Seek out quality too in your networking the people, not just quantity, right?
Yes.
That's another important piece to this.
It is, because the LinkedIn world is endless. Sometimes if I run across a young person who isn't quite sure what they want to do and could I get them a job, my answer to somebody who comes to me that's haphazardly, shall we say, is feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I've got about 1,500 connections. Feel free to pick through there and see what might be helpful. But
Yeah,
that's a 35-year career gathering that many people. If you really want to make it worth your while, put in supply chain leader, supply chain executive, and see who comes up, to your point. All right. So many parents and teachers want to guide their people down career paths. Every parent you'll see when your girls get a little bit older, every parent will say, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? Well, I like to do this. Da, 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 da. What do you think teachers and parents should know about supply chain as a career opportunity, and how to encourage their kids or their students, or somebody that they're mentoring, to get into supply chain?
yeah, it's a great question. I'll just go back to the breadth of the discipline in the industry, right? I mean, you have office-based roles, you have operational hands-on roles, and I challenge our young listeners to just look around wherever they're viewing this today. Literally everything that's probably in your view right now has a supply chain that delivered it there, right? In some form or fashion. It
Yeah.
might have been a truck that delivered it to a warehouse, or a warehouse that delivered it to a CVS. And then also what manufactured the truck, then there's time, and it's endless, right? So if you think about an environment or an industry that you want to get into where there's a lot of opportunity, I mean, this is the one. Again, literally look around. I mean, it's literally endless. So I just think there's a lot to it that maybe people aren't aware of, and I know that's part of what we're doing here today. So it's just a lot to it, and there's a lot to enjoy.
I think that's really great to kind of emphasize to our teachers and parents how limitless it is. Case in point, I was driving home from the gym the other morning. There was a tractor trailer broken down on 76, and a mechanic was there with him, and the mechanic and the driver both easily older than I was by a good bit. And all I could think of is, oh my gosh, what do we do when these guys both retire?
Yeah,
Who do we back that workforce up with? And that's a lot of what's driving WIN-NextGen, is knowing that there will be a large, exodus of our baby boomers, and then even people in my age group, from the working world. And who backs that up? We need mechanics. We need truck drivers. We need, people business analysts. We need all of those things that make supply chain flow, because to your very important point, everything is a supply chain.
yeah. No, it's a great point. And that's true. That's not just speak. There is an issue with backfilling talent right now, right? So
Yeah,
there's an opportunity for sure.
absolutely. All right. So one last question for you, now that I've tortured you for 30 minutes.
Oh, this has been great.
Oh, I know. Isn't it so fun? I can't wait to do our next one. I can't wait to see who you bring me next. But to close our second episode of Links and Leaders, Keith, if you could give one piece of advice to our next gens who are listening today about building a successful and meaningful career, inside or outside of supply chain, what would that be?
Great question. I think I'll come back to maybe my theme here is that a combination of a positive attitude, strong work ethic, and a willingness to learn can accelerate any career development in any field, not just supply chain. So you do the little things and opportunities will come your way. I promise.
That's awesome. Keith, thank you so much for this time. Really, really appreciate it. on behalf of WIN-NextGen, this is just such an important piece that we are trying to continue to drive interest in STEM, supply chain, skilled trades, all of which go hand in hand. And having you here tonight really kind of emphasizes our message, and I appreciate it.
Oh, pleasure's all mine. That was fun. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Elisa?
Great. Thank you, Jen and Keith, both so much for this amazing conversation and all that you do, each of you, to support the next generation. This was so incredibly insightful. My heart is smiling. I know it's going to help a lot of young people, their parents, guidance counselors, and all of those who will be able to tune in. And I really think this is going to help people think differently about supply chain and the future of work, which, Jen, we know that is why this series was born. So
Yep.
to everyone, thank you for joining our WIN-NextGen community. Until next time, remember, together we can.